Right, good to be with you, and thank you so much for your kind welcome. And I should have said earlier, but I'll say it now before I forget, we're having wonderful hospitality as well. And I want to thank Britt Kerry for her kindness and all the work she's doing to look after all of us. All of the speakers have been staying at this place which seems to have limitless beds. I don't know where they all come from, but there we go. Thank you to the family who've made us so welcome. So I want to talk to you about the Bombardier beetle, which is something which inspired me some years ago and led to my doing some research based on, of all things, the beetle. I never thought that in my work, which has been in thermodynamics, combustion, engineering, and basically mathematics applied to the combustion area, that I'd ever end up actually building something, copying a beetle. But that's how I ended my career, and it's still going on. I'm doing a little bit of work with Liberty University in America as well. Please have a look at this book, which is on the bookstore. It has a section on the Bombardier beetle. It has a section all about insects. I've written a section on hearing and on other matters, and you'll enjoy Stuart Burgess's sections as well. And it really is meant as a book to give to people for Christmas or birthday, and just to encourage them to think about creation. So learning design from creation to inspire innovative engineering is really what my work with the Bombardier beetle is all about. We call that in English, I don't know how it translates into Norwegian, but we call that biomimetics, copying nature with a view to using it in engineering. But of course, there is a little bit of an issue here when people see me saying, well, this implies design. Am I thinking of a God of the gaps idea? Because I don't understand something, then I appeal to God doing it. No, I'm not. Because it's not what we do not know that shows to me that there is an amazing mind behind the Bombardier beetle. It is what I do know. And the more I know about the Bombardier beetle, the more it points to design. And there is a verse in Romans 1 which says, the invisible things of God, him, from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. And then it goes on to say, so that they are without excuse. Those who refuse to believe are without excuse. There's another verse, Colossians 1, and yet another one, Hebrews 11, which says, by him were all things created that are in heaven, that are in earth, visible, invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions, and so on. But please note that it says that are in earth. Well, that's the closest I can get to saying that the Bible refers to beetles, right? Because it says in the earth. Well, that's where beetles normally reside. So there you go. And it says in Hebrews 11, things which are seen were not made of things which do appear. God has made it abundantly plain that he's made all things. The Bombardier beetle, where is it found? And a few other things that I'm going to say. And then I'm going to very quickly go through some of these things, just to show to you the amazing things that God has done, even in a beetle, which I ended up studying, as I say, towards the end of my time. Because it's a sort of an evening hour, I didn't think you wanted something to stretch your minds too much. But I will say a few other things about the applications, which are to fuel injection systems, and even to fire extinguishers, which I will come to at the end. But there's many other applications as well. So where is it found? Primarily it's found in Africa. It's found usually under stones, close to water, and it will feed on little bits of meat. Usually, as far as we know, it's carnivorous, will feed on dead things, but it also needs some other minerals in order to keep its amazing system going, which I'm going to show you in a moment. The system of spraying others from its backside. That's what it does. In North America, they're a bit smaller. South America and Africa, they've got the largest ones. They're even found over here. They're even found in the south of England. They've been found close to reasonably hot water or reasonable heat they need. It's not usually in cold conditions, and as I said, close to water. How then does the beetle system work? Well, it ejects a mixture of chemically heated steam and nasty chemicals, noxious chemicals, out of its back end. Now, let me assure you that it's not passing air having had a big meal, you know what I mean? You know, it's not sort of saying, oh, I feel a bit full. No, it's nothing to do with that. It's a separate system, and it wards off predators like ants, birds, spiders and frogs, which are trying to eat this. The beetle generally wins and stuns its opponents, and it's even got a movable exhaust turret which comes right up and over. I think Ukrainians could do with some of these. And it can go in any direction, right? It can go in any direction it wishes. It's really quite extraordinary. Now, we're having a few problems with the sound, but hopefully this will work, as we got a Heath Robinson affair here that I brought with me. So let's, you don't translate Heath Robinson, don't worry about that. Okay, now you can hear this. That's what you actually hear in the laboratory. You actually hear that little sound. But in order for you to appreciate it a bit more, this is a professional, that was me just using my video camera, in a laboratory of Tom Eisner from New York State, from Cornell University. He's actually passed away now, but he was a most interesting gentleman. And I haven't got time to tell you his story, but it really is fascinating because he comes from a Jewish background and he had his own tales to tell me. But so that video was taken in his laboratory. This is a professional video by the BBC, and this is what it does.
Few creatures will risk annoying a bombardier beetle. It mixes a cocktail of deadly chemicals in a special chamber. They react and explode at boiling point from its rear end in an awesome chemical weapon.
Pretty impressive, I think you'll agree with me. And it really is laughable when you see them do it. I've even had some which I collected, and they lived in my kitchen for a while, and they would blast and there would be a bit of smoke, and it was really quite fun. And we even got to know them. But there we go. But a few other videos showing Tom Eisner explaining these beetles.
One of the really amazing things about it is its ability to display in a very beautifully aimed fashion. And that shows up very nicely when you put the animal on indicator paper. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pinch very lightly one leg after the other, just as if I were an ant biting these legs. I'm going to start with the right hind leg, right front leg, left front leg.
That's quite amazing. Now, they then carried on filming, and this is what it does next.
At 400 frames per second, the action has been slowed down, but not enough to see the individual pulses. So they went to a lab and filmed the beetle at an even faster speed, at an incredible 4,000 frames a second. There were the pulses, each one corresponding to the individual bursts of sound.
So it was that a bit of footage which really inspired me, because then I understood, as Tom Eisner had understood, that there was a series of explosions, roughly 400 per second. going on. And so 400 per second or 500 per second, if I was to say exactly 440 cycles per second, the musicians amongst you would know immediately that that would be A on the piano, okay? And that's what you hear. You hear E, and that's because it's a pure vibration that you are hearing. And Tom Eisner suspected that, which is why he went to that speed with the cameras, who had about 10 frames for each blast, and he was able to show that it was an individual blast. And of course it's explosions. Well, I know about explosions, that's my field. So I looked at this beetle more. In fact, Tom Eisner showed me this in his laboratory, which is an electron micrograph, and that's about 1 millimeter across there. Okay, very, very small. And I then realized that it had got twin carburetors. This is a very fancy little creature, and it's got a very special combustion system. And what I'm going to show you here, if I may, and I'll just use this pointer if I can just turn it on. Hopefully it's on. Oh, I don't know how you switch this on. There it is. How do I use it as a pointer? Oh dear, can't get this to work. I don't know how do you there it is. Right, this is one combustion chamber. That's another combustion chamber. This is all in the back end. And I said to Tom Eisner, have you actually sliced through the exhaust here? He said, no, this is still the outside, and that's a bit of membrane which is actually closing the exhaust valve. And I realized then that what I was looking at was what we call a pressure relief valve, that this lifts up under pressure, and this is the remains of the inlet valves, which are closed under pressure. So this gets a bit complicated for 7:30 on a Friday night, but hopefully you can still follow me. So I was looking at it closed, and then this hard cuticle, which was the bit that you could see here, if I just go back here, that's the hard bit of cuticle, we call it, which is hard material. And this then is a diagram of what's going on, and the membrane lifts up under pressure. And we wrote a paper describing this, and really it was that which was the key to understanding what the beetle is doing. And of course it's using chemistry, which I'll come to in a moment. We didn't copy the chemistry, we copied the valve system. But just for you to understand what's going on, there is a reservoir where these things which are going to burn come in. We call those reactants, and one of them is hydroquinone, which is a hydrocarbon, but it's not like the one you put into your cars, although most of you use electric cars here. But the other thing is hydrogen peroxide. Now, you've heard of hydrogen peroxide. It can be used as a bleach, but this is being used as an oxidizer, because the hydrogen peroxide wants to lose an oxygen. So this really is what produces the air, which then combines with the hydroquinone, and it produces benzoquinone, which is a very nasty smelling stuff. And it produces heat, which I'll show you in a moment how that bit works. So the low pressure of this cycle opens the valves. This is just a little schematic. Then when it explodes, it closes the inlet valve, and it opens an exhaust valve. And then it goes round again, and when the low pressure part of the cycle comes in, more fuel comes in, and so on. So we suddenly realized that we'd got here two valves, an inlet valve and an exhaust valve, and this is how the beetle works. In fact, during the Second World War in the south of England, we were constantly hit by flying bombs, which were called doodlebugs because of the noise that they made. I'm going to play it to you. Whoops, that's not playing. Why is it not playing? Oh dear. It played earlier. It's not playing. Oh dear. I'm going to have to come out to play this. For some reason it's not playing. I'm going to play you the noise. No, why is it not playing? Played earlier. No, it's not playing. I don't know why it's not playing. It played a treat earlier. Oh dear. We're having problems with the sound, but let me just see whether it will play on the computer on its own. Yeah, I don't know why it's not. Can you hear that? Well, that's the noise of the doodle bug that I was showing you. And that was powered by exactly the same system that I've just referred to. So if I put this back on, then you can see what you've actually got is it was burning petrol and air, and it was cycling with an explosion such that when the explosion had taken place, it pushed the missile forward, and then on the low pressure part of the cycle, it would take in the fuel and the air. Well, the Beetle's doing exactly the same. It's actually exploding and then treating it is big like a machine gun. Oh dear, it's not working, and I don't know why it's not working. Sorry about this. The sound system for some reason is not working, and I don't understand why, so I'm sorry about this. I'm going to have to do it separately. If I go that way, then I can do this as it goes along. So you're basically hearing a sound. Whoops. Oh dear. No, I can't get it to work. Oh dear. I'm not doing very well here, sorry. I'll bring it back over. So you hear that sound, and then, of course, when the Beetle's doing it repeatedly, it's actually making that sound one after the other. And the whole thing is happening such that there is a series of explosions. So when we actually looked at this, we realized that we couldn't copy the chemistry, but I will just briefly show you what happens with the chemistry. How does the Beetle work? Well, the Beetle works, as I mentioned, by taking these two chemicals and actually producing a nasty, which is benzoquinone, and water. And it needs a catalyst in order to do this. So when you have a catalyst, it means that that reaction goes a lot faster in an explosion chamber, which I've shown you. The catalysts are catalase and peroxidase. Some of these you actually have in our bodies as well. We don't use them for exploding, but this Beetle does use them for exploding. And that reaction won't go fast enough unless it has these enzymes. So actually there's quite a lot of things which this Beetle needs in order to work. And in particular, one of the things that is most important is that you've got to break up this chemical, which doesn't easily burn unless you put some heat in. Let me show you an earlier version of Richard Dawkins speaking with children at the Christmas lectures in what's called the Royal Institution in London, which Faraday had set up these lectures, and he would have been astonished and not been very pleased to hear Richard Dawkins using those lectures in order to mislead these children, which I'm now going to show you what he said.
In fact, the hydroquinone does nothing at all. We can put that on one side. The true story is that hydrogen peroxide on its own does decompose to form oxygen and water, but it needs a catalyst under normal conditions to do that. This black powder here is a catalyst. It's not the catalyst that the Bombardier beetle uses. The Bombardier beetle does use a catalyst, and it does, in fact, squirt this hot substance into the face of its enemy. But if you put a catalyst into a weak solution of hydrogen peroxide, then you're going to get a little bit of bubbling, and it's a little bit warm. That might have some effect on the predator. That might slightly deter a predator, and it would be not particularly dangerous to the beetle. Now we've got a smooth gradient, a bit more concentration of hydrogen peroxide, and that's distinctly warm. That would work more effectively against a predator. And by moving gradually up the slope, gradually increasing the concentration of hydrogen peroxide, we can end up with... So there is a smooth slope all the way up to the effective deterrent against a predator.
So he's trying to argue that Bombardier beetle system could have actually evolved. That's what he's trying to argue. But he made a crucial mistake when he said the hydroquinone does nothing at all. In fact, it's the key to the whole process, because he misunderstood what's going on. In fact, this is another clip that I'm going to show you of my discussion with a gentleman at Liberty University, Garth Hewitt. He's retired now, but he actually showed me what happens when you put the catalyst in. It actually breaks up the hydroquinone, which is absolutely essential. And I'm put here Catalysis 101 because basically Richard Dawkins needed to go and do some chemistry, which he probably hasn't done. But let me just show you this clip.
Drop it straight down the center. Yep. That was a platinum catalyst.
Platinum catalyst.
And now as your quinones formed, see that's orange?
Yes, that's the orange. Thank you for showing me this, Garth. This is excellent.
So what he showed me, and this will really make you want to go to sleep if you were to look at this very, very deeply, but I'm just going to summarize it for you. Some of you might understand the chemistry, but I've just split it into 3 steps here. In fact, it's a much more complicated even than that. But you've got, this is the hydroquinone, which has to be broken up. And notice, if you know anything about chemistry, this means that it needs heat in order to break it up to produce hydrogen, right? That's the first thing, which Richard Dawkins chose to ignore. Maybe he was actually trying to simply say, well, you know, it doesn't really matter. I know better than the chemistry. But actually, I think he didn't understand. Once you've got the hydrogen, yes, it's true that hydrogen peroxide breaks up to produce oxygen. And he was totally wrong in saying that you have to rely entirely on that. Because once you've broken this up, then it produces the hydrogen, and the hydrogen and the oxygen goes bang. And it's that which is vital to the Bombardier beetle. And it produces a huge amount of energy. And this overall reaction is very strong once you've broken the bond of the hydroquinone. And amazingly, this all comes down, these 2 chemicals, down a very small tube, which Tom Eisner showed to me on his electron micrograph. And it's still not understood how those chemicals arise. But both the hydroquinone and the hydrogen peroxide come down the same tube, which is so small, I reckon, as a combustion scientist, because it's only it's actually of the order of nanometers wide, so it's not large enough really to develop a chemical reaction, which is why I think it comes down such a small tube. I haven't been able to prove that. Nobody's been able to prove that yet, but they come into this combustion chamber where the reactions take place, and there is this valve system that I referred to, where as the explosion takes place in here, the catalysts, we think, are solid crystals in there, peroxidase and catalase. This then, like a boxing glove, pinches the tubes coming in here, stops more fuel coming out, and I've already shown you the exhaust tubes there. So it's really quite a clever system. The inlet tubes are pinched under pressure, and the exhaust tubes are open under pressure. So we built, if I just come to the work that we didn't copy the chemistry, but we did do a CFD program which showed to us that once you've got this pressure system in operation, you can actually get rid of the material in the combustion chamber, and we took dimensions of a cylindrical chamber, the volume of which we estimated was very similar to the volume of what we'd looked at. We weren't going to be able to copy the exact geometry of that very complicated combustion chamber, and we just took 1/8 of this cylinder. We had a valve here which we opened at time t = 0. This is blue, represents cold, this represents gas, steam to begin with, and it was a 2-phase model which we actually used computer a CFX program to run, and this is the modeling that we got. The blue, remember, represents cold. The brown and the red represents steam. It looks as though it's going in this direction. It's actually ejecting water and steam in that direction, and it's emptying the chamber. We've got to 1.6 milliseconds. By the time we get to 3 milliseconds or just before, we completely emptied the chamber, which would be equivalent to about 300 cycles per second. So we knew that when we put a pressure effect in, we hadn't done that before, but once we put a pressure effect in, a bit like a pressure cooker, then it would be enough to actually send out what effectively is a vapor explosion, and we knew we got the principle right. So we then went, and I never thought that I'd do this at the end of my career, that I'd actually build something. Well, we had a Swedish gentleman, I'm sorry it wasn't a Norwegian, but it was a Swedish gentleman, came along basically with a checkbook and said, Andy, if I give you the money, will you build this rig? Well, I couldn't do it, so I got a technician with me who knew what he was doing. And it was about 20 times the size of the Beetle. It was about 2 centimeters long. We had a pressure relief valve just in case things went wrong. The inlet valve was here. This is the exhaust valve, and we added this one just as a safety valve, just in case things did go wrong or it exploded in our faces. And we actually got it working. This is what we got. And this was a very sophisticated receptacle. It was actually a bin, a plastic bin. And we knew we'd got everything right because we got very fast ejection of this water. It's just water and steam and small droplets. We were measuring the size of these droplets with a laser, and we were able to actually get something very similar to the Bombardier Beetle. Well, we developed a whole series of rigs, and eventually, even though this is a fairly big rig, we were able to reach 100 times per second with a very good spray system, very small droplets, which many of the people that we were speaking to who could see that there was an application for this system, they were, some of them, interested in very small droplets, particularly if you were thinking of atomizing fuel in engines. And indeed, we took out a patent for a number of applications, including fuel injection systems. So this was a later prototype, which you can see is working very efficiently with a very, very small spray, small droplets. And we were very pleased with these results. And the first application to fuels has actually been made, and the Swedes are actually building diesel engines with an additive system to reduce some of the nasties that come out of diesel engines, because you still have to use diesel-powered trucks these days still. And in order to get rid of the nasty exhaust systems with all sorts of bad particulates coming out of the exhaust, they are using an additive based on the Bombardier Beetle spray to actually reduce the emissions from diesel engines. So it's nice to know that it's being used. So the major features of the Bombardier Beetle are its precise catalytic chemistry, precisely timed inlet valve and exhaust valve, a controlled vapor explosion, a sensory mechanism, which I haven't discussed with you, but that little turret that I showed you earlier actually moves in response to a sensory mechanism. The beetle is not looking at the attacker, it knows where the attack is coming from, and it points the turret in exactly the right place. So there is a number of things which could be copied still from this beetle. It produces hydrogen peroxide, and to produce hydrogen peroxide today is a very difficult thing to do. People have done it, of course, and it's done regularly, but it's quite a complicated process. This beetle can do it without having to, go to the local store to actually say, I want some hydrogen peroxide. It makes it. So there is some interest there, interesting possible projects for a future PhD student on the chemistry. And it can maintain its burst for about 2 to 3 seconds. Then it will have a rest. Then it will do it again, and it'll only be a rest for a second or two. And if it's being attacked by a predator, it can carry on blasting. It's been known for a frog to eat one of these beetles, and the beetle will be swallowed whole, and it will be blasting inside the frog, and the frog will then say, I don't want that, and then it regurgitates it, and the beetle wins. So it's quite amazing what this beetle can do. There's very few creatures which can beat it. The potential application of this beetle and its amazing spray system is, as you can see, concerning the possible applications, is to fuel injectors, also to nebulizers for pharmaceutical drug systems where people may be struggling to breathe in the necessary drug for asthma or something like that. Aerosols and air fresheners, and what we're working on at the moment is fire extinguishers with Liberty University. We're hoping that they might pick up on this, because a fire extinguisher using this system may be able to blast a much greater distance than you could with a normal spray system from a normal water, just straight water spray. So we reckon that with this system, you might be able to get to the seat of a forest fire without endangering the firefighter, which has often been the case in fires, fighting for forest fires or wildfires, as they're sometimes called. So depending which application you're thinking about, for fuel injection systems, you need a very fine spray. And of course, you're not dealing with water, you're dealing then with the fuel. But for other systems, you want a very focused spray, like I just mentioned, for a forest fire using water and steam to actually go a great distance. Just to show you that the beetle can blast a great distance relative to its size, I'm just going to play you another clip from David Attenborough's film, which is called Life in the Undergrowth.
But the master of chemical warfare is the bombardier beetle. It can create a chemical reaction within its body so violent that boiling caustic liquid explodes out of its abdomen.
Can you hear?
By pulsing the jet 500 times a second, it keeps its rear end just cool enough to prevent it being cooked.
That last bit isn't correct. David Attenborough was wrong on that. It's not the blasting at 500 times a second which stops itself from being cooked. It's actually the properties of the material on its backside, which is very insulating and doesn't conduct the heat. We've actually tested that. So there is yet another possible application, which is to the materials community, because there is incredible materials being used on its backside. Or else, as he said, you'd be sitting on fire, which is not a very good idea. So for fire extinguishers, you want a very focused spray. We found that we could get a throw from our 2-centimeter chamber up to 4 meters right across the room. So the throw ratio seems to be of the order of about 200, because the beetle can, from its little chamber, 1 millimeter, could go 20 centimeters, which is again 200. So we knew we were getting it about right when we achieved that in the laboratory. So the Bombardier beetle has a number of applications. I've mentioned the various amazing features of the beetle, but in terms of the applications, the ones which we've looked at are the pharmaceutical application. We're looking at the fire extinguisher at the moment. The fuel injector has already been applied to diesel engines in Sweden and other Swedish-made trucks. I think you may read of it in coming years. And then there are various sizes of droplets which we need and which we can tune this beetle to, depending on controlling the temperature, controlling the relief valves that we use, which we actively control, the pressure relief valve and the inlet valve, and it's all controlled by computer in the system that we're using. We were awarded the 2010 prize for outstanding contributions to innovation and technology by the University of Leeds, and at the University of Leeds, and it was awarded by the Times Higher Educational establishment or one of the big newspapers in England. So when I had a bit of an interaction with Richard Dawkins in about 2006, where he was basically trying to get me fired from the University of Leeds. It was rather encouraging to actually have this this prize given to us in 2010. We've actually, as an organisation, Truth in Science, which I'm a co-director of, produced a DVD which is on transgenderism, totally different to this. But because of that, the University of Leeds then tried to boot me out of the University of Leeds, even after I'd retired, which seemed a bit much. But we did discuss things with them, and eventually I had a lawyer helping me, and I can just say this, that my testimony is that although there have been quite a lot of pressures academically when people knew that I was a Christian and that I stood on a creation base, my testimony is this, that was because I believed in creation that God gave me the understanding of the Bombardier beetle. So when people try to say that you cannot do science and research based on a creation position, that's utter nonsense. It was the inspiration, because I believed in design, because I knew that the beetle must have a design feature to make it do this blasting system, that I understood what the blasting system was, what the spray system was, and people wrote to me saying, oh, I wish I'd had that idea. Well, if they believed in the Lord Jesus Christ, they might have had that idea. My testimony is that God gave me the wisdom to do this. So just briefly, more on the fire extinguisher application. I'm hoping that this will lift off with Liberty University. Just to say there's been some awful fires in California in 2018 and since. There have been some dreadful fires where not only people have been killed, but also firefighters have been killed. In Australia, down under, in 2019, 2020, there was terrible fires going on all the way around the coast there. 34 died in the wildfires and a number of firefighters. So we are determined to try and at least assist with developing a fire extinguisher based on this system. So you might pray that God will give us wisdom to develop this. Here's the patents that we've developed, and some of them in the States and other countries. And if you want to know more information, if you go to bombarderbillens.org, I've bought that website, and it describes all that's going on in the work at the moment. So thank you for listening. I've just about made it. I'm sorry we had a bit of a hiccup at the beginning, but I trust that will have blessed you. My testimony is then that God gave me the inspiration for this, and I want to give glory to God from even a little beetle, right? So beetles give glory to God.